right. Let's do countdown. 1, 2, 3.
Let's count up.
Was I counting up? Okay. And go. Okay, welcome to I think this is our 5th podcast. And we have a special guest, Christian Dye. He's been a long-term friend and colleague to us. Christian is a educator, and he's a financial advisor and also a avid real estate investor. And he has a new book that he's come here to talk about today, which is called Break Your Wealth Ceiling. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you. Yeah, so it is available on Amazon as of yet, so if anyone's looking for a copy. But thanks for having me. I'm really, really looking forward to chatting with you guys.
Thanks for coming. So tell us a little bit about your journey. So in the book, you sort of talk about your uncle's success with real estate, versus your dad, for example. How did you get started into real estate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, the very popular book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if I was to have changed my title, I probably would have called it Rich Uncle.
Right.
Probably not Poor Dad. I would have called it Rich Uncle, Hardworking Dad. Hardworking Dad who fell short a little bit at times. Right. But, both of them were successful in their own rights. But, the premise of the book was following these 3 people, which would be my uncle, my aunt, and my mother, 3 siblings who immigrated to this country. A lot of immigrants come to the country together with their siblings. They were under the same circumstances, which was, of course, getting a job, having kids, raising the kids, buying a home, suffering the 1980s when the interest rates went crazy on them. And then if we fast forward these 3 immigrants who came together, and we fast forward to them in their retirement, all in their 70s, 2 of their stories looks very, very similar to other Canadians, and that is they own a home, they have some modest savings, they potentially even work a little bit part-time, and their kids, went to college. Whereas you have my uncle, where his story under the same conditions was very, very different because he owned an enormous amount of real estate, so much so that he was able to set up all of his children with homes. Wow. And also able to set up them with education, and then also go down a generation and set them up as well. Wow. And so he retired early. From the cash flow from the real estate, he was essentially able to fund anything that he wants to do. If he wants a vacation, if he wants to, build another project, if he wants to buy a new car every year. And so, he was by trade an engineer, so it's not like he made a crazy high income. But when I was young enough, in my early 20s, I essentially used him as a mentor. And I asked him, how did you do it? What did you do differently than what everybody else is doing? And that's where my financial practice started, because I started to practice what I preach, practice what I had learned. And I basically started to grow clients' wealth with the integration of real estate, not just the stock portfolio. Mm-hmm. Stock portfolio plays a role, but it shouldn't play such a large role. Right. And if you take a look at the wealthiest investors on the planet, which it talks about in the book, such as the Tiger 21, these are the wealthiest investors on the planet. They have a little under a third of their assets in the public markets. Then they have about, 21% in the private markets, which is also real estate based, passive real estate based. And they have a solid 30% in real estate, direct ownership real estate. And that's the same formula that, I use, a lot of my clients use. And what we found is that with way less volatility, we're able to, create double-digit returns on all of our investments.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sergeant.
You talk about the dip strategy a lot in your book, and that's the primary strategy you utilize for your clients. So can you elaborate a little bit more?
Sure. So the DIP strategy is an acronym for the diehard, sort of off of my last name, investment portfolio. And it stems all the way back thousands of years, as a matter of fact, to the Hebrews. And the Hebrews, they say, had the very, very first asset allocation. And it was a very simple asset allocation. 1/3 of your money should be in a business, your business, or you invest in someone else's business, something that's growing money. 1/3 of your money should be in reserve, and that's in case there's an accident, in case there's an opportunity. Well, we have insurance for that now to mitigate some of that, but back then they didn't. But 1/3 of your money should be in land, which is the way they described it, but our translation today would be in real estate. And the same formula has held true, which is why many immigrants, Germans, Italians, East Indians, Filipinos, Chinese, will come to this country, and the first thing they want to do is to buy a home. The second thing they want to do is to buy a rental property. You know, none of them are rushing in here to buy TFSAs. You know, it's not even on their radar. Some of them don't even know what that even means. And because I think they don't understand it, they stick to what they know. And the formula here gets even better, because when you grow equity inside your real estate, whether it be your personal real estate or whether it be your investment real estate, the bank, if you have good credit, will allow you to leverage against it. So by leveraging against it, you could buy even more real estate, as opposed to, if I want to put another $100,000 in the stock market, I actually need to earn another $100,000. And so what the dip strategy does is it basically talks about taking advantage of the dips in various different markets. So a good example is in 2008. In 2008, our stock market had collapsed. So we now had stocks that were on sale. Using the dip strategy, we would lean against our reserve or against our real estate's line of credit in order to actually invest in the stock market. And we're not talking about crazy radical stocks. We're talking about safe investments, things that we knew were going to come back, such as the S&P 500. It wasn't even an individual stock. It says, should I invest, leverage money or cash into the S&P 500? And the answer is yes. And then when we take a look in what happened also in that same time frame in the U.S., so a lot of their real estate had collapsed, had gone down. Like $700,000 houses in the U.S. is now worth $300,000. I personally bought a $160,000 condo for about $80,000. So there was, again, another dip, but now the dip was in the real estate market. So taking advantage of those dips is the strategy, but having an advisor who could do the math to say, is this a good idea, is what our practice is about. Because you might think there will obviously be another stock market crash. We don't know where, we don't know when, but when it happens, that people, if they have 90% of most of their money in their RSPs, TFSAs, in their pension, and all of that is down, they're pretty much just victim to just holding tight, waiting. Whereas a real estate investor is going to look at that as a massive opportunity. And then and that's a stock market cycle. But if there's a real estate, there tends to be a real estate opportunity in any given year. We don't need the world to have collapsed. Every single time there's an opportunity, but then the question is where, and also who's going to show it to you.
Right. Yeah. So kind of on that note, like leveraging with the HELOC, now that the rates are higher, I think prime is 7.2. How do people sort of, bridge that gap from when it was a super low interest rate environment to what it is now? So if you've used the HELOC to buy an investment property and your cash flow has gone down, or in some cases maybe you're paying out of pocket, what do you sort of say to those people?
I basically say it depends on the property, it depends on where it is, depends on can you carry it. Like if you can't carry it, then maybe we should look at it, especially if you've made money.
Right.
If you've made money on it, you can't carry it, money's too tight, you've got you got too many other expenses. Maybe you've got a spouse who's breathing down your neck saying, we can't afford to go on vacation this year because of this property. Then, yeah, absolutely think of exiting. But you got to be very, very careful if you are thinking of selling. And the reason is because I call it the 3 regrets of real estate, and that's kind of how our practice is structured. We're preventing the 3 regrets. And regret number 1 is, not buying early enough.
Right.
And anyone who had the opportunity to buy in Vancouver 10 years ago but didn't buy, they're experiencing that now. If they're still on the outside, they're like, oh, I thought it was expensive 10 years ago. The second one is not buying more.
Right.
And that's like, oh, you know what? I bought these 2 really awesome, rental properties 20 years ago. In hindsight, I should have bought 5.
Yeah.
I should have bought 10.
Right.
But the third one is the one you're talking about, selling too early. Selling too early. It's like, well, the line of credit went up too high, and now this thing is cash flow negative, $400. I've made 20 grand on it. Should I exit? The answer is maybe. But what I want to do is I want to prevent them saying 10 years later, saying that was the biggest mistake.
Right.
I'd be up $500,000 if I didn't sell it just because I was out of pocket a couple $100 a month.
Right.
The market had recovered. The rates went back down 2 years later, and so what I find is that just people don't have help. They don't have anybody that can answer that question. And so, you guys are fantastic with your clients, and you help them. You help to support them in the best way that you can. But at the same time, you're not going to figure out their retirement for them. That's not what you do. You're not going to figure out their taxation. That's not what you do. But you do work with people like me, and and I work with people like you, and to say, is this a good time to get in the real estate market? Says, okay, we got to talk to Ryan and his team. Right. We got to talk to Wayne and Ryan. Let's get them on board. But when they come in the reverse, should I sell this property at this time? He says, we should get Christian involved in this conversation, because we don't want you to make a mistake. We don't want you to have a regret later. And when I look at it, I look at, well, what's the historical growth rate of Vancouver? And right now in my book, I have it at 9%. Historical growth rate of real estate, 9% annual on the last 10 years, 8.5% on the last 20 years, and 6.5% on the last 30 years. But the Canadian, all three numbers are above the Canadian average. Right. So Vancouver is going to continue to go up just based off of the data alone. So I would look to say, well, if we hold on to it, even though it's negative a couple $100, what will it look like in 5 years, or what will it look like in 10 years? Because in my opinion, they might say, yeah, I have the cash to feed this investment, which is now negative cash flowing. But my question would be, if you sell it, what are you going to do with that cash? Right. Then they might say, oh, I'm going to take this cash and I'm going to reinvest it and bulk up my RSPs, or I'm going to overfund my own mortgage to pay that down. Well, I can calculate what the value of that is going to be worth, and by killing an asset that's growing at 9% over the next 10 years, often find that things don't last in the negative forever. If you have a negative cash flowing property, it's not going to stay negative forever. Now, if it's deep negative, like 2,300 negative on a one-bedroom condo, now there's probably a higher and best usage if there is any equity there.
Right. Yeah, and I think we both have some of those stories. I had a place in 2009, 2010 in Olympic Village in that Exchange building. Remember that story? And I think I paid like $330,000 maybe, and I just bought a house in Port Moody. And I panicked because everybody in Olympic Village could not get rid of their product. Yeah. You just looked around, nothing was selling. And I'm like, I'm stuck with this.
It was undesirable.
It was undesirable. I'm stuck with this. And I just bought a house and I had negative cash flow. It wasn't even that bad. I think it was maybe like $500 or $600, but I panicked.
You sold it?
I sold it. I panicked. So if I had kept that, that's more than doubled. But, at the time, so as a realtor too, I should have thought, Ryan, just ride it out. But, the emotions and stuff, thinking like, oh, what's going to happen? And I panicked. So now, that was a lesson for me as well.
I think everyone's experienced the three regrets that I said. It's not like, I actually don't know anyone who's impervious to it. Yeah. Even the guy who said, I bought 3, I could have bought 8, but I only bought 3 and I knew it was a good deal. And then I was almost the same. I have this great story of a house that I own out in Abbotsford, and I bought it. And when I calculate the ROI on an investment, and people can understand why real estate guys make so much money, is, it cost me $50,000, and I put it as a down payment on a $350,000 house in Abbotsford. Yeah. And what had happened to that house was it was flat for 4 years. So 2008 to 2012, there was a house down the block that was selling for $345, and it was almost almost the exact.
I think
same
I've been
house.
to this house at one point with you.
Yes, yes. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to buy this other house because I already know the demographic. I already know that when I bought the first house, it was negative cash flow by probably about $100, maybe even $200. Right. So I think I was renting it out for. I want to say $1,700 a month, maybe $1,800 a month. And then what had happened was I had this opportunity to buy this other house, and that was my regret that I didn't buy it. And it wasn't, I knew it was going to make money, but I thought, you know what, I already have a bunch of other real estate in other areas, and I one thing way back then was you could put as little as 5% down payment on a rental property. We call it the good old days. Right, yeah. And that was the time where I could pick it up pretty lightly. So I didn't buy it, but of course I held the first one. And so when you calculate my ROI on my $50,000, the $350,000 house today is now worth probably about $1.1 million. Wow. And that was 2008 to 2024. but it's the math gets the math gets more complex when I also add in 5 years later I leveraged against the line of credit to buy the condo that you helped me buy.
Right.
And that condo we bought for $250.
Wow.
And that one is in Abbotsford as well, but that one I think just got valued at $550.
Wow.
Around there, and it could even be more now. I think that was what I looked at it like a year or two ago. So how much did I actually make off of $50,000?
Right.
So the 50 is now I've got probably a solid 900,000 in equity in the one house, and I got about at least 200 to 275,000 on the other house. So I actually don't know any other way to make $50,000 in a traditional investment make quite that amount of money, and that's not even accounting the rent.
Right.
The rent from the Abbotsford house is split into 2 suites. I suited it several years ago. Is about $3,800 a month.
Wow.
In rent from the 2 suites, and the condo is about $2,400.
Yeah, it's interesting because you touch on the rental aspect too as sort of part of retirement savings, and the rents have gone up substantially over the last couple of years. I know I have half duplex in Nanaimo, and that tenant's never leaving. He's probably $500-600 below market value. So a lot of times these tenants, as soon as they leave, you have a pretty big jump in what the current market value is, so people don't realize that as well. So no, that's interesting. I think you have to realize don't panic. So that's what I tell myself now too in these situations. Don't panic. And I think Vancouver, not that a bubble can burst. They've been talking about that forever, but I think people want to live here. Our climate's great. It's a beautiful city, and we tend to do well, as you said, over a historical amount of time. So
I'll tell you now, there's going to be no bursting of the bubble.
Yeah, it hasn't happened.
And the thing is, I'm a math guy.
Right.
I've studied this bursting of the bubble quite closely. There's a correction, absolutely, and that's natural, and that's maybe 10, 15, maybe. But I just go off of the numbers, and if you read the book, you'll realize I'm a math guy. My background's in mathematics. So 1 million new Canadian immigrants have been approved to come to Canada, and I guarantee they're going to fill all those slots, and there'll still be a lineup outside the door. So that's 1 million per year.
Yeah.
There's 300,000 new starts that have been approved. That's $700,000 spots that are unaccounted for. Where are all these people going to go? Where are they going to go? And as soon as you sign up that I want to go to Canada, where's the first place they often say? It's not, Saskatchewan, no offense.
Vancouver, Toronto.
But it's going to say Vancouver, Toronto.
Right.
That's where they all want to go. That's where my parents immigrated to. They said, where do you want to go? Vancouver, Toronto. He says, well, we don't have a spot for you, but if you're willing to go to Winnipeg, you can be there next week. And then all of a sudden, let's go to Winnipeg. How bad could it be? And then all of a sudden.
Then they go through a winter.
That's where my dad landed. My dad landed in
Winnipeg.
And then he's like, when he got there, I can't take my mom from China over here. There's no way. We're not living in Winnipeg. We're not starting a family in Winnipeg. So they ended up in Vancouver, and that's when my mom came over.
Because once you're actually physically here, then of course you could migrate inward.
That's a tough sell, right?
It's a tough sell. Like I know for us, we also left, but we had established and then we bought a home and we did all of those other things. But yeah, even now people still want to go to our climate is better. Like we have a bustling city, and then Toronto's got the same story over here. There's not enough land. And it's very, very popular.
It's interesting. Yeah, I was talking to somebody about that actually the other day, and they're saying, I have all this money from cryptocurrency, and that people are trying to find ways to hide from the government, so to speak. I won't name names, but he was saying, one of the reasons that I still think that BC is home is because of the climate. Because if you go to like a Portugal or Japan or Asia, it's so hot in the summer, right? And it's getting worse. Like I think one of the places has had like 50 degrees Celsius. So I mean, we're getting hotter summers, but it's tolerable in comparison. And so I think a lot of people like, I'm gonna go move here for the rest of my life, but then you realize, I can't climatize to this, right? So you're sweating as soon as you walk outside.
Yeah, and it's not only the people who are moving here and buying; it's the people who are moving here and renting. Like I know here in Vancouver, my wife's Irish, and when we're in Ireland, a lot of people said, I want to go to Vancouver. I want to go to Vancouver. And they're not saying I want to go to Vancouver to visit. They're saying I want to go to Vancouver to work for a minimum of 2 years.
There you go. Yeah.
And then there's a lot, and they come with a ton of skilled labor. These aren't just like backpackers. These are guys in the trades. These people in tech. They want to come here, but they want to do like everything else. They want to establish. They'll start off as renters, and then when they realize how great it is here, they want to buy. You know, if your first stop after coming from, you know, wherever it is Vancouver, and then you said, you know what, I think I'm going to look around and I'm going to go find someplace else to live. There's a lot of things you're not going to replace.
Right.
You know, a lot of things like Seattle probably has similar climate.
Yeah.
And it's a nicer place, but you're in the U.S.
You're in the
So
U.S.
you might not want to be. You don't want to be an American citizen. Right. Or if we go, to be honest, even Toronto, it's not a coastal city.
No.
If you come to a coastal city, it's hard to leave a coastal city.
Right.
You know, the coast is what I find is I always need to live near the water. And so once you get the taste of, hey, wait a minute, I can ski in the winter times, I can hit the beach in the summer times, I can go to the lakes, I can ride my bike, very, very friendly. What would cause anyone to exit Vancouver if they could afford the rent and if they could afford the housing prices?
Right.
You know, not a lot.
That makes sense. And I think a lot of the like mass exodus is because of that, because they can't afford it, and maybe because they haven't set up the systems to be able to stay here and sustain it, right? So, which is helpful in the book.
That leads us to our, I guess, next question. So when's a good time to get started with a dip strategy? And
as soon as you're born, like this.
Your book covers that.
It's funny that you say as soon as you're born. I guess it's really at the stage of life that you're at. Like a really quick answer is, if you could afford to purchase a property, whether it be your first property or your third property, then now is the right time. But the where is the second question.
Yeah.
But the answer is now. And leading to the second book, which you haven't asked, but thank you.
I will.
It's basically talking, right now it's a working title, but it'll be called How Will Our Kids Be Able to Afford a Home in Canada? And then the subtitle will be, you know, Solutions to the Next Financial Crisis. For the next generation. And the idea is when Ryan said, oh, when should you buy your next property? He says, as soon as you're born. Well, for a parent, they should be thinking about that. And this is the reason why. I've done the math. And I have done the math, but I haven't put it in the new book yet. If you were to say child is born, and within the first 5 years, what are you thinking about? How are we going to fund their education? Right? So then you're going to do a traditional thing, which is do RESPs and start pumping money into an RESP. I'm saying, hold on a second. How many different ways can a child at age 18 fund an education? So first of all, my daughter's in college now. She lives at home. It's actually not that expensive.
Right.
To be honest, between her private schooling and her extracurricular activities such as ballet, I'm actually cash flow positive by her stopping those activities. So college is actually cheaper for me, for my daughter, and for my other two daughters will be the same. So I actually never used any of my RESPs. I'm just saving it for the next child. Because my monthly cash flow was actually better by her stopping and going to high school and dance classes. But on top of that, aside from essentially being in Canada, school is not that expensive, especially if they live at home.
Right.
But there's scholarships, there's student loans, there's a 4-month summer to work. It's actually not that expensive yet. As soon as they're born, we're like, we should start pumping money into our RESPs. But think about this. Forget the RESPs. How are they going to get a down payment?
Right, which is a bigger thing.
That is a significant. A child is born, and you say to yourself, and this is another working title, do you want to walk, drive, or fly to your grandkids?
Right.
Do you want to walk, drive, or fly to your grandkids?
Right.
And then the subtitle will be start working on the real estate problem now. You know, because how are they going to come up? Like, I'm learning.
So interesting,
okay, so a 2-bedroom condo, starter place with a family. You know, your daughter or your granddaughter suddenly says, you know, I got my master's degree. I'm a teacher with a master's degree. I'm going to go into administration. I've married an engineer. He's got his master's degree. Okay, let's start with the 2-bedroom condo. Those incomes will probably not have a $300,000 down payment.
No, you're right. Yeah.
And that's what the starter is going to be in 20 years. That's a starter condo. You know, they're not going to have $300,000. So, okay, now they're caught in the rental cycle a little bit.
Yeah.
Whereas I'd rather invest now in a pre-construction, in, a condo, something of that sort now. Hold it for 20 years.
Yeah.
And now I've got a property with equity in it dedicated for my child. If it's close enough to my neighborhood, maybe that's their starter home. Or if it's not, guess what? I'm going to take the equity out of this home. And I got options. I got a line of credit option, or I've got, I could just sell the property. And now a child has at least got a starter. Yeah. So what I'm saying in the book, I'm also saying this in the new book, our crisis is real estate. Stocks aren't going to solve our real estate problem.
Right. Yeah.
Real estate is going to solve our real estate problem, unless you are some magic genius in the stock market.
Course, yeah, unless you know how to pick the.
Unless you know how to pick them. Unless, okay, let's say we have 3 kids. Okay, that's what, $1 million hacked into 3. That's going to go towards that. What's that going to do to your retirement?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I know too, a lot of, and you kind of touched on it in the book, a lot of financial advisors don't really touch on real estate that much. So a lot of people, like if you just go to the bank, for example, they're not going to be like, oh, why aren't you buying, a condo? Or they're going to say, buy this mutual fund, or I'll set you up with this broker. So I think it's good to educate people early on about real estate, because a lot of people just think maybe from the other generation, if you have your stock portfolio and your RRSPs, then you should be good. But really when it comes to retirement, a lot of them are still struggling.
I use the word ordinary Canadians or ordinary people or average people, and by definition, I'll call that a working professional that makes a little under $100,000 a year.
Right.
So if you got a couple or a couple, so maybe they make $160 a year. That's what I'm considering average, right? I have yet to find an average Canadian by that definition who has millions, like multi-millions of dollars in RSPs by retirement. Right. I've done the math. Even if I shave off 10% of their disposable income and then grow it, even at a fantastic 10% rate, they're not multi-millionaires.
Yeah.
What I find is that the traditional stuff, and I do think that traditional financial advisors do a really great job in growing wealth and protecting wealth, but the numbers aren't strong enough for them to become what I would call wealthy.
Right.
I would say that those are strategies to get them to not be poor, to not starve, to not need social assistance. Yeah. But I don't think they're going to set up 2 generations with education, housing, going down 2 generations with an income of that field. So I don't know one. If somebody knows one, please reach out to me and let me know. But I know too many who've done the other way. They had an average income and they grow this massive amount of real estate wealth, and then they share that knowledge and that wealth among 2 generations.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I think we touched on the podcast before too. We've had clients, or a lot of younger people think, well, I'll be good because my parents are going to sell their house and I'm going to get this large down payment. And we've actually had clients where both the kids and the parents are clients, and the parents, we realize, wow, they have a lot of debt, and it's not good debt. Like they're using their home equity line of credit to pay down other stuff. And so it's kind of like, well, I can't really tell the kids, but maybe don't shop for furniture. Like a lot of people don't know like what their parents have or don't have. So they expect, my parents have this $3 million house, so I'm good. I'm gonna get a condo. But like, well, no, you're not, because they've been using their HELOC in the wrong way.
Yeah,
right?
but not only that, they're like, I'll be okay because I have equity. My parents have got a lot of equity in their home. Yeah, a parent might live till they're 97.
Well, that's the thing now. Too.
You're gonna get the equity when you're mid 70s.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Prince Charles, man.
This
guy's king in his 70s.
His kids are okay, but
but and even at the same time over there, like, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this. I've heard this comment where people are saying, I'm going to downsize. Take the equity in my home, I'm going to downsize to a condo, and they're literally like, the condo costs almost as much as the home.
Yeah.
So it's like there's not a ton left over to go spreading the wealth. It's not like you're going from a $2 million house to a $300,000 condo. You're going from a $2 million house to a 1.3, because they still want a nice standard. Yeah. They're not going to be living in some small crappy place working that hard all their life.
Yeah. So no, that's the interesting thing. I think a lot of people from the next generation are in for a surprise, and so you kind of have to make sure that you're set up and not rely on what you think might be coming your way.
Speaking of the next generation, I came across this from another book. I think it was called The Psychology of Money, and I'm going to steal a quote from it, but they call it the 3 for 30. You want to sacrifice the first 3 years in order to enjoy the next 30. That's housing. That's Vancouver housing right there. That's the teacher married to the engineer, and they're both just graduated, sacrifice those first 3 years. Live at home, or live off of one income, sacrifice one car or both cars. Do whatever it takes so that by the end of those 3 years, you've got a down payment.
Right.
Do whatever it's going to take so that you've got that down payment, and not relying on the parents to help. Because my one issue with the parents helping is they said, again, would I rather walk, drive, or fly to my grandkids? And if they're not threatening, but if they're saying my only option is to move away, then you're like, oh, no, we're going to help you. We're going to help you. We're going to help you. But you got to be careful with that help, because you're taking from their wealth. You're taking from their retirement. Yeah, they might have $1 million, but by them giving you $400,000 of it, have they done the math to make sure that they're taken care of?
Right.
Because it could come back to bite you again when they said, oh, we have enough, but we didn't have enough for the long-term care issue.
Yeah.
Sure, we can, live off of whatever, $4 or $5 grand. But when a long-term care comes in and that's $15,000 a month, and of course, we take care of our parents, and, where's that money going to come from? Well, if you've already sucked out their wealth, then it's going to come back. Now you've got to flip that bill.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of sacrificing, and I pretty much did the same thing. Me and my wife sacrificed our first 3 years, and we were living off of one income. We did everything to make sure that all my student loans were gone, make sure that, there was no debt lingering from our wedding, and then making sure not only did we buy our first property, but by the second year we were able to also buy a rental property. Right. And that's how we started building our wealth. And I encourage young people to do that. And I know a lot of people think that real estate is too expensive. It's too expensive. It is expensive, but it's not expensive everywhere.
Right.
And working with the right team and working, you might not live where you buy. But what's more important is you want to start building the equity. You want to get in as fast as possible. I still have yet to have had a client. I've been working in this industry for over 15 years. And usually they say, I have a 5-year plan to go buy a home. I says, forget the 5 years. Let's make it a 12-month plan. Yeah. I have yet to find a client where I got them a map to get them in that home, maybe pumping the brakes on paying back student loans, maybe pumping the brakes on RSPs, but get them into that home within the 12 months. 5 years later for them to say, Christian, that was a terrible decision. Why did you convince me to buy so? No, I've only had people the opposite saying, oh my goodness, thank goodness, because now, back then we could afford a 2-bedroom. Maybe now we'd be struggling to afford a 1-bedroom. Or back then we were, struggling to do this, but I didn't realize it would keep going up so viciously. Most people who bought early have big smiles on their faces right now.
Yeah, and I think that's the case for most of our clients. Especially within sort of a 3 to 5 year time frame, they've all done relatively well. And kind of to touch on that, like even myself, I asked you for a contact for a Calgary realtor. So obviously Wayne and I sell in Vancouver, but if it doesn't make sense with what you have to work with, there's other opportunities, Calgary or this, the States or Mexico
for rental.
So you don't have to necessarily just do Vancouver. Obviously we want that, and we think there's still opportunities here, but there's also opportunities in other areas.
The game is building equity.
Yeah,
right?
The game is building equity, and that's the whole idea of working with advisors like all of us. Is you're trying to say, well, what is your goal, and what's the best way for us to get there? And I know there was a client that you and I both work with that I introduce you to, where I was saying you got to buy, and he says, oh, but we're part of this amazing rental. I think it was a rent controlled building in Vancouver. He says, we don't want to give up this rental because it's such a great area. He says, yeah, but you're not building up any equity. Year 1 didn't buy. He says, we'll wait for it to go down. He says, I don't think it's going to go down. Year 2, year 3, finally in year 3, they're like, I think they were pregnant at that time. Like, we got to buy. And then you ended up getting a place out in Langley. Yeah. And then they ended up building it. They never lived in Langley. Never lived in Langley. 5 years later, they took the equity and then they bought their own home.
Bought a house,
So sometimes we got to get creative.
Yeah, no, I think, and like you say, the earlier you can do it, the better. So, and kind of at that point, you touch in the book about, working with trusted professionals like ourselves or mortgage brokers that you trust or that, know certain areas or know about investments. How is that important in your practice, that sort of all work together?
Like I think I'll even take it a step further. Even the accountant, even the lawyer. You want real estate. If you're someone who is interested in growing your wealth in real estate, you want everyone on your team to be interested in growing your wealth in real estate. I remember talking with a client, And they said, yeah, 10 years ago, I asked, what's the best way to save on taxes and grow my wealth? And my accountant said, max out your RSPs every single year. If you do that, then you will hit that formula. Then he basically said, 10 years later, I'm not wealthy, you know, and I know a lot of other people that were wealthy because they started investing in real estate. And I said, well, does your accountant invest in any real estate? He says, I don't know. I never asked them. I know my personal accountant, who does a fantastic job, invests heavily in real estate. Him and I are aligned. When I say I'm going to buy more real estate, he doesn't say, no, don't do that.
Right.
You know, a financial advisor, if you said, I want to grow wealth in real estate, and you go to him and says, I want to take $300,000 out of my portfolio to invest in real estate, what will they say? Will the quick answer be, no, don't do that, and here's a bunch of reasons why? Right. And if the answer is yes, and you're a real estate investor, and you want to be a real estate investor, maybe you're with the wrong advisor. You got to remember, they're incentivized to invest as much of your money as possible because they're making a percentage off of it. So I understand we all have to make money. Right. But with me, we're a fee for service. So our practice is fee for service. So if I say go invest heavily in the stock market, it's down 30%, I don't profit from you doing that. If I say you should buy this property in Calgary or Langley or, you know, in Vancouver, I'm not a realtor. I don't get any commission for that. I'm doing that because that is the best way to grow your wealth based off of the analysis that I've done. And if I say don't do anything at this time, it's the same thing. It might be the timing might be wrong in your personal situation. So I shifted to a fee for service about 5 years ago, and it's been wonderful. I was able to attract that portion of society where they really didn't have help for the questions that they were trying to solve. Right. You know, and for people who go to the bank or, you know, have an advisor, if it's going really, really well, fantastic, stay with them, change nothing. But if you sort of feel, you know what, I have been wanting to grow more of my wealth in real estate, or I have been maximizing my TFSAs and RSPs, and I don't think I've really, you know, this idea of creating an abundance of wealth, I haven't seen any of that yet, but I know of stories of other people who have done that, then maybe you want to explore getting another advisor, someone else who is more focused in the same way that you are. And if it's real estate, that would be sort of, you know, a team like ourselves, but then extending it on, it's like an accountant is pretty key because people trust their accountant, they trust their advice. But you could give the same problem to 3 different accountants. All three accountants will give you different ways to minimize capital gains or to you know, to grow wealth in retirement. You know.
No, that's good. And that's why we, you know, like working with you too, because I think we're all honest. And I think we're not just about the commission in our case, and you're not just about the fee for service, because if you're honest with those clients, even if you don't get their sale now, they're going to be like, well, Christian gave me honest advice. I'm going to go back to him. He wasn't like, yeah, buy this so I can get paid. And we don't say that. We don't, you know, say to clients, buy this so, you know, we can get paid. We'll be honest with them. And sometimes it's going to maybe cost the sale for the short term, but the long term, you've built that trust.
I know many clients that I've sent your way where you actually said, now's not the right time. Now it's not the right time. You should hold. You should wait. Not all of them listen to you. I can think of a couple of stories where family members of mine who actually are like, Ryan said to not sell it now. He says, oh, I'm so panicked. I'm so scared. And I'm like, oh, you know. But no, I think that both your practice and my practice are actually mature enough that we're not looking for, you know, we don't need food on the table from the next sale, so to speak. And I think that's a great position to be in when you're part of a pretty established practice where they've got a track record, and you know that you're getting good advice, and they have, you know, a lot of clients who gave testimonials to say, I've been working with this person for years and they've given us good advice. And there was another client that we shared, and when she separated from her spouse, she went to 3 different advisors. And I was the third one, and the first 2 said, take, you know, all of your current wealth and let's create a nice big balanced portfolio for you. And then when she came to me, I said, let's take a minimum of 1/3 of this and put it in real estate. And then she thought, really? You're the first one to say that? I says, oh no, there's some great opportunities. Let me pair you up with my realtor colleague Ryan. We're looking in the Fraser Valley, and this was when the Fraser Valley was still incredibly affordable, but we knew it was going to go up. We knew it was going to go up. And then to make a long story short, I think she did very well just recently, and then she's taking a lot of that equity to put into her own home now. But there's no way any of that same amount of equity could have been done I've done the math. She probably would have needed a 28% rate of return over 5 years to have matched what just literally investing in a piece of real estate, renting it out, getting a property manager, and then just making 2 or 3 decisions per year, has done for her.
Right. Yeah. There you go. The other thing, I guess, for people, sort of the end goal, and I know you get to travel a lot, and you've had some time to write this book. So maybe you can kind of touch on what real estate investing has helped you on the personal side and kind of have that balance.
Yeah. Not only me, but many of my clients, right. The one thing about real estate is it's exponential. And it's that last tail of the last 10 years or the last 20 years where you see a tremendous amount of growth, which allows you to make different decisions in your life, such as taking more time off from work,
right.
Such as, having this balance because, it's almost like at first it looks like a faucet that you just slowly open and some water keeps trickling, and that's the cash flow. The cash flow is kind of that trickle. But if you own multiple properties, then it starts to trickle a bit more. But if you just did nothing else but just held those properties, let the mortgage go down, paid by the renter, and let the equity value go up, let the rent go up, that it starts to actually flood quite a bit. And that's what happened to my uncle, where he had so many properties, and in his retirement, he had so much money flooding in. He's like, I'm going to take early retirement. Right. And then he started to say things like, I'm going to help other people. And then I'm just going to work on more creative things. So I'm not quite at that stage yet. I still do work, but I definitely have enough time to write. I have enough time. I was in Europe for a month. Yeah. I have enough time to vacation. And my kids are still fairly young. They're just in their teens still.
Right.
And so what real estate has done for me is it's allowed me a lot more freedoms that I don't think, and I do have stocks, I do have RSPs, I do have all the traditional stuff, but that is giving me nowhere close to the amount of cash flow that allows me to do some of the balance things that you're describing.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a big piece of it, because have you guys talking about that social media thing that says 75? You get 75 summer, 75 winter, right? 75 winter, and it scared me, because it's like, what? How many summers have I had? Yeah. And then you think, how many summers or winters or vacations you have when you're healthy, So and that's why I think we have multiple properties, and why we also preach real estate, because we want to have the time to enjoy it too. While we can. And you just never know what's going to happen. Like the COVID, we lost that year, basically, not being able to travel or to do stuff. So I think for all three of us, we're able to travel a lot. We're able to enjoy time with our family, and a lot of that is, or probably 99% of that for us is because of real estate. Yeah,
and for my uncle, it's the same thing. He travels an enormous amount, and it's interesting. He actually says he can't even travel enough to spend the amount of the cash flow that's coming in, which is this incredible, like you can't even think of that as a problem. But he said, so oftentimes from what my cousins have told me. Are you the favorite nephew, by the way? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I am, because I'm the only one not asking money.
There you go. Yeah.
But I know that he has the ability to do a lot of things. Like if one of his kids' roof needed a repair, he actually has the ability to fix the roof for them. If someone was getting married, he has the ability to flip the wedding. And that's a pretty cool position to be in. And I've got 3 daughters, and I would like to be that go-to person where we have a financial issue. Can you help?
Right.
And I know, like with my family, I don't know about your family, but oftentimes we get an email chain of someone needing help. Right. Can you contribute? Someone in California, someone in the Philippines, someone needs help. Is it possible to ask for some money? I like being the go-to guy. I like them saying they can rely on me to probably give a fairly generous donation without me having to sweat about it too much, and that's helping people.
Yeah.
And that's helping people. So I kind of, just even I like traveling with my siblings, and I like traveling with my other family, and I like being the go-to guy who rents the boat.
Right.
I like being the go-to guy who, maybe even provides the housing. and those vacations. And that's a really awesome position to be in.
That is.
You know?
Like Uncle Christian's the best.
That's right.
Spreading the wealth.
That's right. He just paid my tuition.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You always have to have that favorite uncle.
Yes.
That's awesome. Nice. And when is the next book? When do you think that would be?
I'm hoping by next year. I'm actually talking to one publisher, and I think it's timely. Because a lot of people, they really want, well, what are these solutions? What are these solutions? So I kind of give you a bit of a teaser on some of these solutions on how will our kids be able to afford. I think they got to think of their next home,
right?
To be honest. Like the next time you sell a home to someone, if you see that they've got young children and you say, here's a lot, but I could build a sixplex on this thing in the future. And here's another lot. It's smaller, but man, does it have an awesome kitchen and it's got a pool. But you're like, that's not zoned for anything. It doesn't have a laneway. It doesn't have this. Yeah. And these places are about the same place. Move that conversation in that direction.
Right.
It says, I got young kids. What are you talking about here? 15 years from now, they're not going to be so young.
Yeah.
You're going to have options with that lot. You know, whenever you've got land, you've got options. And then there's other things too. I think we're going to see, and I'm encouraging it. It's old school. It's like generations ago, people had multi-generational living on the same lot. Like you have 3 generations on the same lot. Again. Yeah. Well, now there's nothing wrong. First of all, there's a lot of good things about that. Staying close to family, bypassing having, a daycare, or bypassing having home care for the next generation up. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, there's a massive amount of savings. So you can get that person who just graduated, get them on their feet, let them sacrifice those 3 years in the home because you've built something in your home which is going to accommodate them and their spouse. When they're ready to leave the nest with their own down payment, you could save an enormous amount if you live off of one salary.
Right.
Yeah. 2 young professionals living off of one salary. So those are some of the ideas that we're coming up with. And then a lot of them is also starting early.
Right.
If you have this opportunity and you could afford, let's say, a pre-construction or a rental property, but you have a 20-year vision of that. Now, by doing that, maybe you can't afford the renewal on your Tesla lease.
Right.
Maybe you can't afford quite as much towards your next vacation, but maybe you got to go camping let's do camping this year as opposed to Europe. But by 2 years of doing that, suddenly I have a down payment to do a pre-construction. That pre-construction is on a 1-bedroom out in, wherever, Mission, Langley, wherever, but with intention that property is meant for child 1. Rinse and repeat. Now I've got a one for child 2.
Right.
And I think having that long-term vision real estate is going to solve our real estate problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you kind of touched on like the multifamily, the province is changing the zoning. There's to mass scale to allow, 6plexes, 12 stories, 20 stories. So I think having just sort of, one family in one residential house, that's kind of passing us by because it's so expensive. So these are actually opportunities, like you say, if you could have a family that's in a 4plex or a 6plex and maybe down the road, you could split it up. One kid has, a unit, another kid has the other unit, and there's equity in just that lot with having those 6 units. So it's going to be different for the next generation, and I think that's not a bad thing. It's just a family buying a house outright is just not going to happen.
Right now there's obviously a gap.
Yeah.
What I've done in the next book is calculated the gap at how much wider it's going to get.
Yeah.
So you think that the gap is wide now, it's going to be horrifically wide. And I know one of the countries we're looking at is Switzerland.
Oh, wow. And
Switzerland has got a very, very, very high rental population. So it's like you'd be in a room and everyone there is a renter.
Yeah.
More or less. It's very, very odd to find somebody who's an owner. They also have, now they have to shift their entire ideas about housing. They're very flexible and all these other things. I don't want Vancouver to turn into that. I don't want Toronto to turn into that where it's rare to find a homeowner, where the only people are homeowners, they all got gray hair.
Right, yeah.
We want people, young people, to stay in the city, own a property, do a lot of the traditional things. And remember, until the government takes this away, but our home is still capital gains tax free.
Yeah.
So downsizing your home, you've got tax-free money in an environment which historically has grown by 9%. A 9% growth, and that's the growth on the property itself. That's not the growth on the down payment.
Right.
If we go the growth on the down payment, it's multiplied by 5. It's 20% down payment, you're multiplying that by 5. So right away, I kind of find what other tax-free shelter, which is fairly non-volatile, which has massive amounts of growth, can we invest in? Okay, if we call it our home, then how do we get there if it's so expensive? 3 for 30. Sacrifice those 3 years, sacrifice 3 hard years, get into that housing. I know it'll be small, but you got to remember, if you sacrifice 3 years and you're already a working professional, there's something out there you could buy. You might not be able to live in it because it might not be in, kits, but there's something out there that you could buy. Start building that equity, transfer the equity when you need it, and that would be a formula of advice I would give to a young person. And for those who take that advice, 10 years later, they're going to look back and say, yeah, it was the right advice. Because I know that because 10 years ago, it was the right advice when we thought that our markets were high then. 2014, we thought our markets were high.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I think a lot of it is just that sort of herd mentality, because we're having so many comments right now about, well, I'm just waiting for the rates to go down. And then we say, well, when you realize when the rates go down,
everyone and their dog.
You're going to competing again. We're going to see these 5 offers, 6 offers, 7 offers. Actually, I had a house, we were surprised, 10 offers this week in Port Moody. So some of it's already heating up.
Back up.
So imagine if that rate drops 0.5 point or 1%. I mean, you're going to be competing with a lot of people. So now's a good time, but people are like, well, I'm waiting to. So it's that mentality. It's hard to kind of get around it because the media and everything else is saying like, oh, wait, it's so expensive, but it's actually cheaper now than it will be. So.
It is, and that's why you want to work with trusted professionals. I know people. It's like this blog said this, so why don't I put my entire financial, or my buddy says this. The most dangerous information you get is essentially free information.
Yeah.
You get free information from your parents. Sometimes your parents have good information, sometimes they have bad information.
Right.
You get free information from your friends, you get free information from the internet. But when you work with a trusted professional who could kind of do the analysis, do the math, and I'm sure you were telling clients who were interested in buying in 2024, I'm sure you were telling them to buy 3 months ago.
Yeah.
If there was something there.
Of course,
something
of course
there.
You got to find something still, but
if there's something there,
absolutely.
but right now, especially in Vancouver real estate, waiting and timing.
You can't time
is things that if you're trying to time our market, so many horror stories of people who tried to time the rate or the purchase price, or I think it'll go down, all of that stuff. It's a dangerous game. I've always said, if you could afford it, if it's affordable and you like it, then you should buy it. And don't worry if it goes up or down in the next 2 to 3 years, because I guarantee in the next 5 to 10, it will have gone up.
Yeah, that's one of your regrets, right?
That's a regret. I know many people who are still on the outside, and you know them as well,
for sure.
Where they were talking, I want to buy, but it's too high, let me wait. I want to buy, it's too high, let me wait. Like sometimes I catch up with these guys a couple years later. I'm like, you still haven't bought? You were talking about Ryan 4 years ago. And you still haven't bought? So I'm waiting for the right time. He says, that right time went with the train.
It went past it. Yeah. Anything you want to add?
Anything I want to add? You know what? I've got 3 young daughters, and if I was giving advice to them, it's the same advice I'd be giving to anyone who's listening right now. And if you're not on the inside of the market yet, it will be painful.
Right.
Like whatever vision you have of what you're going to own, you might need to lower that, either by location or whether by size. But that's not a reason not to get in. You got to get in, do what it's going to take to get in. Early inheritance, 3 for 30, sacrifice, give up the car. You'll save a ton of money on that. Do whatever it takes to get in as fast as possible, because this is the time where you're going to find not years go by, sometimes decades go by, and all of a sudden you're still on the outside. And, when you retire and you have no place to live, you'll be victim to our very, very high rents. And that's the one thing inflation is good for. It's good for real estate investors. Like if you complain about inflation, real estate investors want inflation.
Yes,
It increases our rent, increases the value of our properties, right? So I would say get in faster. Whatever your time frame is, cut it in half and get in there faster.
Makes sense. Where can people reach you? I think we'll put that on the screen.
Yeah. If anyone ever wanted to reach out to me, there's a couple of different ways. One of them is to visit my website, and that's at www.latitude-west.ca, latitude-west.ca. And then you could probably get to know me a little bit in my practice. And then if you wanted to email me directly, it's at CDY, so Christian, CDY, and then it's latitude-west.ca. And then we can kind of go from there. If for nothing else, I encourage that you grab the book on Amazon and go and just listen. Read it. And we're right now in the process of trying to get it on Audible. But right now,
are you going to be the one reading it?
You know what? That's interesting. Right now, the answer is no.
Forrest Whitaker.
Right now, the answer is no, just because I don't think I could find the time to. The practice is a little bit too busy. Maybe it'll be me. I don't know.
Well, you know what? We have some books. You're lucky enough to pass them on to us. So we're going to give some books out. The first people that comment on this podcast, which means we're going to hopefully get some more viewers. We're going to give away 5 books. So just like our video, reach out to either myself, Wayne, or Christian, and we'll get you a book as well. All right. So the book again, Break Your Wealth Ceiling with Christian Dye. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Christian.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That's a wrap.
Yeah, that's good. Holy cow.